We're on. That took me by surprise. Well, hi, Callum.
Hi,
Tell you what, I'm awake now, but I'm really worried about the next 5 weeks because how the hell am I going to stay up? This is just like the wrong time zone for me, this T20 World Cup.
It is going to be tough. There's going to be a lot of midnight starts and it's going to be late finishes, but it's going to be worth it. We'll all be staying up. Who are we kidding? We won't be going to bed before the last ball's bowled. We just got to find a way to stay up.
It's all right for you. You've got a baby. Isn't that just like normal night?
Oh, yeah. Look, she's just found a rhythm too, Layla. So, no doubt I'll bang something on the way to the TV or back to the couch from the fridge and she'll be wide awake and then I'll be missing overs here and there and there'll be wickets falling and I'll miss it. Yeah, no, it's all ahead of us, though. It's really exciting. The T20 World Cup, it's right on our doorstep now.
It certainly is, and we're going to talk a little bit more about it. But for now, let's get on with the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Timed Out for Sporting News Australia with me, Melinda Farrell, and Callum Ferguson joining us as ever. Again, why do we ever think it's going to be not a huge week? But it is a huge week. I can tell cricket season started in Australia, or it's getting big in Australia now because of the way my inbox is filling up. Now, if you're joining us live, please do drop us a question or a comment in the live chat. We'll get to it if we possibly can. I can see an early hello there from Rahul Nutaki. Hello, Rahul. Hi, Mel. Hi, Callum. He says, one of our most regular and loyal viewers. So thank you as ever for joining us, Rahul. Summer is here. Yes, you are right. Summer is absolutely here. Let's get on with our topics for the week. And first up, well, it's reached the pointy end of the IPL, but it kind of ended on a bit of a sour note for RCB generally, but there's been some sort of comments made on social media by Glenn Maxwell and Dan Christian. Dan Christian obviously was taken to town by Sunil Narine, Narayan, I should say, who belted him for all parts, really, didn't he? It was an unfortunate ending for him. And Maxwell, after making, I think, 5 half centuries, he didn't quite fire with the bat. But it's the reaction on social media that's been pretty full on, hasn't it, Callum?
Yeah, it has been. Unfortunately, there's been some pretty ugly stuff sent around on Twitter, Instagram. A number of the players in the RCB lineup have been targeted quite heavily by criticism, but it's gone a bit further than that and overstepped the line. There's been a lot of abuse, and it was a real pity to see that it's actually gone a bit further than just the players into some of the players' family, and that's just not on. It's not acceptable that the players should have to accept any of that, but taking it to family members, partners, it's ugly. And unfortunately, with the way the world is with social media, there's still a lot of anonymity in the world, and I just feel like that needs to stop and it needs to be changed. But it takes away from what's been a fantastic contest and certainly what's been a fantastic tournament. You want to be talking about the game and the cricket that has been great, not talking about some of the stuff that's going on off the field in the social media front.
Is that something you've had to deal with much as a player, and does it get to you?
Yeah, you do. I think anyone that hadn't received some of that at some point, who's been in the game for an extended period, would just be oblivious to what's going on, and they're not seeing it, and they're not on social media, because I don't know too many players at all that haven't received or been on the receiving end of some form of abuse online with the social media. So unfortunately, it's rife around the world, whether you're playing in Australia, Bangladesh, New Zealand, the Caribbean. It's worldwide, unfortunately, and it's something that, while there's anonymous accounts on these platforms, we're not going to see end anytime soon, unfortunately.
Yeah, it was a real shame. Look, I can see our friend Rahul it says, oh, end of the Kohli era on as RCB captain. What will his legacy be? What will it be?
Oh, look, it's been a really tough one for him. He hasn't had the results that he would have liked. He would have loved to have won the trophy and been a bit more successful more often as a team with RCB. But he's a strong leader, and we know that he gives it his all every time. He sets a great example for his teammates. So he's been a strong leader. He probably just didn't have the results that he would have liked with RCB.
Yeah, it's going to be a definitely new thing. You can play the duck sound now. Sorry.
No, there we go.
There it is.
Very generous.
They were very generous. Look, and I'm going to a big shout out to Blowbox, who says, "Hi, Fergo. I love to see you perform in the BBL for the Thunder because I'm a Thunder fan." There you go.
Oh, that's nice of you, Blowbox. Unfortunately, I won't be there this year, but I certainly love my time at the Thunder, and thanks for all of your support.
Yeah, see, well, that's the nice bit, isn't it? Why can't people be nice? I get that fans get very frustrated, but the world's a better place. We need, a little bit more of this in the world.
I agree with that.
Absolutely. Well, let's turn our attention to the other T20 competition that is coming up, and the T20 World Cup is obviously ready to ignite. Well, is it going to ignite, or is it going to be a slow burn on some pretty slow pitches? And still trying to find out, and I find this amazing, talking to the Australians this week, they don't know, certainly in the last couple of days when we've spoken to them, they don't know which matches are going to have fresh pitches and which ones aren't, which seems astonishing to me. I would have thought that you would know that before you went over there, wouldn't you? Isn't that something you'd ask?
Well, you'd certainly be asking. I don't know that it happens at every tournament where they give you a rundown of what's going to be happening with the pitches at each individual ground. Now, obviously, we're not dealing with a huge number of grounds compared to some of the other places that the tournaments have been held, but it's got to be a real concern that we're starting to see the wickets slow up so much in the IPL at the moment. How well will the wickets hold up over the extended World Cup that we're going to see coming soon? I feel like they are going to be a slow burn. I think it's going to be a lot lower scoring than what had originally been thought, because we have seen a lot of high scoring in that part of the world at different stages. But the curators are going to have a real job on their hands trying to maintain the squares and make sure that they're getting ample time to recover in between use. So, look, I think it's going to be a slow burn. That's where I see it landing. And, you'd just love to see an even contest between bat and ball. I've got a real concern around that.
Yeah, it's going to be one of the big questions, I think, certainly one of the big stories of this IPL. Now, interestingly, Australia I asked Mitch Marsh yesterday if he'd been given any clarity on his role, and he pretty much said that he believed if he was playing, that he was going to be playing at number 3, which you imagine might push Steve Smith into the middle order, or is he definitely in that first side? It's odd with this Australian team. It's the first choice 11 still seems a bit up in the air, or a bit of a mystery, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. But what I would say is that if this tournament goes down the path of being a bit of a slow burn with the way the wickets are, the more important Steve Smith's going to be to this lineup. Whilst he may not necessarily have the brute power that some of the other players in the Australian lineup have, what he's got is great finesse and an ability to manipulate the ball in the middle overs. And that's something that Australian lineups at times have really struggled to find. And he's going to be an enormously important cog in this lineup. We have traditionally picked guys that are just clean ball strikers on wickets that come on and bounce, and they're true pitchers. And we've been found out around the world on the back of picking a lot of openers and number 3s to bat middle order positions on slow wickets. Well, this is going to be a really big tournament for the Australians, and Steve Smith's going to be enormously important on these pitches, I believe, if not the most important player in that batting lineup.
I'm waiting.
There it is.
And just a note, just something that I really noticed. It's like Marcus Stoinis has disappeared off the face of the earth. They've kept him very quiet about Marcus Stoinis. It makes me wonder about how bad these niggles might be, which would have obviously a significant effect on Australia's plans, I think, because I think they've planned on using him quite heavily. But yeah, it's all very quiet on the Marcus Stoinis front. So bit of a mystery. A couple of comments coming in from our friend Andre Leslie. Here on abusive players. People should leave it out unless they can do it better themselves. Says Dan Christian, blown his chances of being called into that Oz team. Did get hit around. I mean, he was probably only there. There was probably only an outside chance of him playing, I think, really, would you say?
Yeah, look, I think that full strength lineup, he's probably not at this point in that lineup. But certainly I believe that if he was called upon, he'd be a guy that could win you a game, and that's with bat, ball, and in the field. So I think he's a very valuable player in that touring squad, because as we know, injuries happen, as we've seen with Marcus Stoinis. With Stoin going down, Mitch Marsh's role will certainly become even more important with his ability to bowl as well. But look, Dan Christian isn't a frontline bowler. He's a guy that in certain conditions will be potentially your best bowler on the day. But I believe his number one strike asset is with the bat, and I'm not too concerned about him getting hit around a few times, because that can happen to anyone, and it could be anyone's day to go around the park. The IPL is an extremely strong competition, so it doesn't concern me too much that he got hit around a couple of times. He had a couple of very good performances with the ball as well, so I don't think he's hurt his chances. He's been playing cricket, which a lot of the other guys haven't been.
Yeah, well, that's another whole story about lack of preparation, and it's having that guy, isn't it, who can come in and just is only going to face 10 or 12 balls and make them count. I guess is the thing that Australia's been really looking for. So let's get on to. Oh no, before we get onto it, just one by Rahul again. How is Sunil Narine still so effective 11 years on? Mate, he's so important to that West Indies side. And you noticed his absence, I think, when they hosted Australia early on. And I mean, yes, Australia were missing players on that tour, but so were West Indies. And what he brings to that side, and what he showed in that game against RCB, I don't even know how he does it. Ageless, maybe focusing on T20 for a long period of time. Is that what it is?
Yeah, look, I think so. It's probably extended his career in T20 cricket, no doubt, by dropping off the other formats. So he's a guy that's actually added a string to his bow in the last 4 or 5 years. He's now being used all the way through the batting order, and created enormous flexibility for the teams he plays for. So that is one way that he's managed to stay successful, and it takes a little bit of pressure off his bowling potentially as well. But it's great to see. I had one season with him at the Renegades, really enjoyed his company. He's a great fella, and to see him so successful so late in his career is a thrill to watch. And let's hope he has a big one with the West Indies, because if he's playing well, the West Indies are going to be in every contest.
Yeah, absolutely. It's they're going to be an interesting team to look at, although Nicholas Pooran's form is possibly a bit of a worry. Okay, yeah, let's bring up our third topic for Timed Out today. England squad announced. Probably not really any surprises in the England squad, but hey, they've announced one after all the toing and froing, and will they, won't they? We have a squad, Callum. What do you make of it?
We have, and it's great. Look, we're obviously missing a couple, aren't we? I mean, seeing Ben Stokes not named is, obviously a bit of a concern. Or not a bit of a concern. It's a huge concern for the English fans. But certainly, it's a side that has match-winning ability throughout it, but it's certainly an inexperienced lineup, I think, and one that look, I just can't see them winning over here in these conditions with the lineup the Australians are going to have at their disposal. As I said, there's match winners in that lineup, but I think there's a lot of inexperience, particularly in the batting. And, you'd think that Jimmy Anderson, and who's probably going to lead the attack along with Stuart Broad, have they got enough teeth left to do enough damage to the top order? We talked offline a little bit, didn't we, Mel? And you mentioned how great it would have been to see Mark Wood and Jofra Archer in the same lineup over here. And I agree. They're two guys with pace and wicket-taking ability that the English would be desperate to have in that lineup. But, at the same time, but they'll have Mark Wood still, and he's got some airspeed. And I think if it is a dry summer, his ability to create some reverse swing at high pace and be able to use the short ball will be enormously threatening if they can get it right as a bowling group. But if they're leaking runs throughout the day, then that makes it hard, because you're not going to have to take on a guy like Mark Wood if you're just scoring consistently through the day. And that's where Leach and Bess are really going to have to be at their best, because it can be a graveyard for finger spinners over in Australia. We know that.
It certainly can, and they opted against bringing Liam Parkinson as well. So that was possibly one that maybe people thought a leg spinner could have come over. And a lot of, pressure on Ollie Robinson, of people thinking that he might go well out here. And I guess with Wood, you're not going to get 5 tests out of Mark Wood. That's going to be their other concern as well. But
I like Robinson. He's a competitor. Yeah. I played a little bit against him in county cricket, and he was at you, and he was a guy that does like to compete, which you need to be in Australia, because there's going to be some long days in hot conditions. But I believe, and having seen him in his early stages of his career, that he is a guy that if he gets an opportunity, does have what it takes from a mental point of view, I think, because he's got, and if you look at his physical attributes, he's tall, he gets over the top with his action. He might be able to find something in the wickets early in the test matches, but, it's going to take a full group effort from a fast bowling front, because they're up against a very good Australian team, I think.
I'm just waiting. There it is. I am going to ask you a question without notice, though, seeing as you know what it's like playing and not playing. You've got one team in England that have played a lot of Test cricket this year, even in the past 6 months, and you've got one team that's played bugger all, and not even just not played Test cricket, but not played much red ball cricket at all in the past 6 months. Might that play into things a bit?
I think it certainly gives the English a chance early in the series. I think if they get off on the right foot, they could definitely use some of the momentum and the last 12 months of solid Test cricket to their advantage. But if they let Australia into the series and let them find their feet, again, your point about them not having played much is valid. So that could create a few doubts in the Australian players' minds if England start well. It will be a factor, but it is, I think, reliant on them starting the series well. If they get off to a poor start, it'll count for nothing.
Yeah, it's all eyes on the Gabba, and I'm intending on being there, so I can't wait for that. So let's pick up our final topic for the day. And in the end, Australia, convincingly won the last T20 of the series. It sort of felt a bit like a fizzer in a way, as dead rubbers sometimes do. And in the end, if you look at the points, Australia appeared to win the series quite convincingly, but it seemed so much closer to that, and India possibly could feel a bit unlucky about the rain and some of the things that weren't in their control, but also disappointed possibly in their fielding, which was in their control.
Yeah, look, they had their chances in this series, didn't they, the Indian women? And, in the end, I think it was just a little bit of polish that got the Australians a little bit of extra class over the line. What was pleasing, I think, from an Australian standpoint, was to see they got over the line quite convincingly in the end without a lot of their big guns firing. And I think that's a real positive going forward for that Australian team. The emergence of Talia McGrath, one of the good South Australian Scorpion girls. What a performance from her, player of the series. Just an enormous performance from such a young player. She's announced herself. She's a lock in that side now, and I can't wait to see her just keep building on the start that she's had, particularly in that T20 portion of the series. The way she played under an enormous amount of pressure at times was just a wise head on very young shoulders, and it's a great sign going forward. There's no doubt about that. But the Indian women will rue a few chances that they missed. Keep thinking back to that game where the last over, they had quite a few to defend, and no ball, a few overthrows. It was a bit all over the shop. But what I loved about the Indian team was they just kept coming, and it was really only in the last couple of games where it just looked like a few of those lost close games just really wore on them and wore them down in the end. But it's a great sign for the Indian team going forward that they've found a few players and certainly shown that they can compete consistently with this Australian team.
Do you think because so much has been made of the gap, like Australia is so professional and they've been seen as the benchmark for all sides for several years now. There's this feeling that India, they've been getting closer. Does this series show that the gap is not perhaps as great as people might have thought it was?
Yeah, look, I think so, and certainly the Test match showed that, didn't it? It's in Test cricket, there's not usually too many places to hide, and in the longest format, they certainly had the better of the Australian women over that 4 days. So I think long term, that'll give them a lot of confidence going forward. Whilst the table at the end of the series doesn't look particularly pretty, I think it was 11-5 in the end. It doesn't really tell the story like you mentioned earlier.
It does. A question from Andre. Do you think a women's IPL is going to start up soon? Aussie's WBBL experience shone through in a few key moments. I don't think it's coming soon. That's my opinion. I think it's just one of those silly chicken and egg things. I think if India were to win I think if they'd won in 2017, the World Cup in England, I reckon we'd have a women's IPL by now. I reckon if they'd won last year at the MCG, then maybe plans would be underway. But they always talk about lack of depth as cited. But some of the players that we've seen come through in this series show that there's possibly a bit more depth than people realise. I don't think it's that far away, but I do think it'd make a difference, don't you?
Yeah, it'd be fantastic. And I think that, in the next 12, 18 months, I think there's going to be increasing pressure on the BCCI to start up a women's IPL, because I can only see the WBBL in Australia getting stronger and stronger. And I think we'll see the standard improve again this year, which I think will heap more pressure on the BCCI and Sourav Ganguly. And look, it would be a great addition to the calendar, I think, and certainly we're finding more and more consumption of the women's game, and that bodes really well for the future and the professionalism of the women's game around the world. Whilst it's really strong here, it'd be great to see it really spread over the coming years to the point where the BCCI start an IPL up in the women's game.
It would be so good. We can only keep our fingers crossed. It's a funny thing, Cal. I'll let you in on a little secret. When you're at an ICC women's tournament, there are a lot of people from a lot of countries who would like India to win it. It doesn't matter if they're Australian and the Australians are in the final. If it's England and England are in the final, there are a lot of people who want India to win it just because they know what it would do.
Would come with that, I
think. Yeah, that's exactly right. Look, the only other thing, this is not an official topic, but Justin Langer put up an intriguing post on his LinkedIn profile that ABC Sport put on Twitter. I'm not sure if we're able to bring it up, but I just wanted to ask you about it. You actually brought it to my attention. It's a sort of I don't know, a desktop calendar thing. There you go. I'm not even going to read it all, but just even the first bit. A wise man once said, "Don't give them a taste of your own medicine. If they lied, let their medicine be honesty. If they played with your emotions, let your medicine be maturity." And it goes on and on and on, as you can see. Now, if you post this on LinkedIn, then you want people to see it and you're trying to say something. Have you got any idea what is he responding to? Criticism? Is he? What do you think that's about?
Well, he's become the Riddler, hasn't he? With a post like that, I look at it and I just wonder whether he's. I mean, if you do read it, and it took me a couple of reads to start to get my head around it, but it reads as if he's just saying, "Look, I'm going to be who I am, and if you don't like it, lump it." That's about what I came up with, and I'm not sure whether that's going to read well to the playing group, who we know recently have been making suggestions or asking different things of the coach to see him change in certain ways, as we've seen publicly recently. So I don't know whether it flies in the face of all of that or not. What was your read on it?
Well, it sounded to me like it was. It's a self-affirmation, but it certainly comes across as responding to criticism of his style, because it's about being true to yourself and you being unique and special. So yeah, it does seem like it is, and I think you're right. It's one of those things where is it in response to what the media have said, or is it in response to, and the media, don't forget, a lot of the stuff that's come out in the media has come directly from players and staff. So people with knowledge. As much as people might think journalists make it up, they're not making it up. So yeah, I just think that's a very odd thing for him to post on the eve of a World Cup tournament. It's going to be an intense environment for 5 weeks, in a bubble. Do you really want to sort of add to the intensity with that kind of stuff? I know he's very much into it, into earthing and everything else, but it's an odd thing. I'm not sure if it's a great move, because when you are the Riddler like that, what you're doing is you're allowing everyone else to interpret, which is exactly what we're doing. So
I'm not sure if that's the healthiest thing and what they're after at the moment. You don't really want to be creating more speculation around the team. It feels like they actually, as a team, need to be healing, like he's talking about there. He's talking about healing himself. I think the whole group, the feel around Australian cricket and around the public is that it almost feels like the Australian team needs to heal and come together leading into this Ashes. So I hope that's what's happening behind the scenes, and I hope I'm reading into that, reading into it wrong, but it feels like it's flying in the face of what's been projected to the media recently.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Watch this space, because I feel like there's going to be still a lot more. I know they've said they've moved on and everything's fine, but I'm sure there's going to be more on the whole sort of team dynamic and situation over the next couple of months during the T20 World Cup and the Ashes. Well, that was a show and a half. There is a lot going on, Callum. There is so much going on, and I'm so happy. Yeah, it is great. I'm so happy to have you to talk to about it all. It's a highlight of my week. Late nights.
I've loved being a part of it.
See, good. This is it. See, I told you, the world just needs more kindness. That's more of it. But look, we're going to be talking lots. Of course, we've got T20 World Cup coming up, and that's going to be huge. And the WBBL is starting as well. So there's lots of cricket here in Australia as well. So let's just forget about eating, sleeping, doing everything else for a while. And we'll be back in a week's time to talk it all again. Thank all of you for joining us live as ever. Give us a subscribe, a like, do share if you can. And we'll see you back here next week. Until then, bye-bye.
See you guys.